Hi. It was the kind of evening that was supposed to impress. The kind where people spoke and clipped, curated sound bites and posed for photos as if their lives were magazine spreads. I remember adjusting my cufflinks at the entrance of the Langham Ballroom, aware of how out of place I already felt in a room brimming with polished ambition. My wife, Claire, on the other hand, she belonged to the scene tonight. Or at least, she desperately wanted to. I watched her glide through the room in a midnight blue gown that had required 2 fittings and an entire debate about whether it was elevated enough for the gala. The moment we arrived, she seemed to shed the weariness she carried at home. She was bright, laughing, alive in this curated world of curated people. I trailed behind her as she greeted one acquaintance after another. My name was mentioned less than my job title. "This is my husband, Ethan. He runs strategy for..." And the rest would be swallowed by the clink of champagne glasses or distracted glances towards someone more notable. Dinner was the peak of it. A long table of industry faces, many I recognized from trade journals or LinkedIn highlights. The conversation buzzed with big deals, upcoming product launches, who was buying what. Claire sat one seat away from me, sandwiched between 2 startup founders whose net worths were probably triple mine on paper. At first, I let her chatter wash over me. But then the moment came, the one that cracked something in me. Someone down the table made a half-joking remark about couples in the industry. "Seems like a lot of power pairings tonight. Some very strategic marriages, huh?" Claire, wine-warmed and far too quick, leaned in with a smile too bright and said, "Some women here really married up. Well, I went for heart over wallet, I guess." There it was. The kind of line that might have passed unnoticed if not for the little lilt in her voice. The deliberate pause for effect. The ripple of polite laughter that followed stung sharper than I expected. I didn't need to look around to know people were watching me, taking in the subtext. A man whose wife was quietly signaling he hadn't quite measured up. Claire laughed along, swirling her glass, oblivious, or uncaring. When her gaze swept to me, I held her eyes for a moment longer than polite. She blinked, then looked away. The rest of the dinner passed in a muted haze for me. I caught fragments of her conversations, mentions of luxury retreats, new boutique trainers, exclusive circles she'd been trying to wedge herself into. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about that joke. It was about the shift that had been coming for months. A shift I had been trying, perhaps foolishly, to ignore. By the time dessert was served, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger burns hot. What filled me was colder. A slow, settling clarity that this wasn't accidental. Claire hadn't lost herself. No, she was positioning, climbing. And for the first time, I let myself consider the possibility that where she was climbing, I was not meant to follow. The morning after the gala, Claire was all soft smiles and hangover remedy chatter. She pattered around the kitchen in silk pajamas, humming as she prepped a smoothie. If she sensed the weight in the air between us, she didn't acknowledge it. "Good crowd last night, huh?" she said, tossing spinach into the blender. "You should really talk to Greg sometime. He's doing incredible things with that new investment fund." I watched her for a beat too long. Something about her tone was off, too light, too casual, as if we'd attended 2 different events. Or maybe as if the part that mattered to her was what had happened after dinner, when I'd slipped out early and she'd stayed for the after-party under the guise of networking. I nodded once, non-committal, and left it there. No confrontation. Not yet. But that cold clarity from the night before hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things, small at first, the kind you dismiss if you want to keep believing everything's fine. Claire's phone was suddenly always face down. She'd started following a slew of luxury influencers on social media, women with perfect veneers and curated lives, all pushing, leveling up mindsets. Conversations at home shifted. She'd drop comments about other couples we knew, about high-value men, and how some women really knew how to position themselves. Position themselves. That phrasing stuck with me. Then came the first undeniable clue, a message thread that popped up when she carelessly mirrored her phone to the TV one night. A series of flirty DMs with a man I recognized immediately, Daniel Mercer, a prominent entrepreneur in our extended professional circle. Married. Highly visible. The kind of man who would absolutely be at the center of the circles Claire was now circling. The messages weren't outright incriminating, yet, but the tone was unmistakable, playful, familiar, tinged with something more. Claire had typed, "You always know how to make me feel seen. Some nights I wish we could just skip the formalities." Formalities, like the ones that came with marriage vows. That was when the last of my hopeful denial crumbled. This wasn't about a moment of weakness, or a lost connection between us. Claire wasn't spiraling, she was calculating. She wasn't lost, she was climbing. And me? I was a rung on a ladder she'd already started stepping past. I didn't react. Not outwardly. No accusations, no arguments. Just methodical observation. If she thought I was going to fall into some emotional spiral and hand her more leverage, she was mistaken. I spent the following days watching her new gym, where half the membership was built around exclusivity and networking opportunities, the shopping bags that grew more expensive, the sudden late-night meetings, and industry mixers. And the more I watched, the colder my resolve became. She wasn't leaving by accident. She was making sure she landed somewhere higher first. I intended to make sure that fall, when it came, would be hers alone to bear. If there's one thing my career in corporate strategy taught me, it's this: you never engage when emotions run high. You gather, you verify, you plan. That mindset served me well now. Claire thought she was playing a game of appearances, flirt, test the waters, position herself for a better match without jeopardizing her standing. What she didn't seem to understand was that beneath the polish of this social scene, reputation was everything. And I knew exactly how fragile hers really was. I didn't bother with phone cloning or private investigators. Too noisy. Too easy to backfire. Instead, I watched her world shift from the inside. It started with her new gym. Not just any gym, an elite club that marketed itself as curated wellness for executives. Claire had lobbied for the membership for months, claiming it would broaden her professional connections. Now she was there 5 times a week, always with perfect hair, expensive athleisure, and a bright eagerness that hadn't shown up in our marriage in over a year. Her wardrobe changed next. Pieces I knew didn't match her current income level. Designer labels slipped in under the guise of sales or gifts. Her nights out multiplied, networking dinners, exclusive industry salons, members-only art shows. I noted it all, saying nothing. The confirmation came quietly through someone I trusted, Matt, a colleague whose wife occasionally crossed paths with Claire at events. Over coffee one afternoon, he hesitated, then said carefully, "Look, I wasn't sure if I should mention this, but Claire was at that after-hours event last week, the one at Mercer's penthouse." I kept my expression neutral. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Yeah. My wife said she saw them pretty close most of the night. It wasn't subtle." I thanked him, left the cafe, and drove for 2 hours with no particular destination. Not because I was shaken. By now, that possibility had hardened into expectation, but because I needed space to finalize my next moves. That was the moment the last flicker of hope died. There would be no honest conversation that fixed this. No therapy, no wake-up call. Claire wasn't being led astray. She was leading herself. I let the sadness settle for a day quietly. Then I put it away. From that point forward, I treated the situation exactly as I would a sinking asset in business: contain the damage, protect critical interests, execute an orderly exit. First, I began disentangling our financial overlaps, closing discretionary accounts, securing personal holdings. Second, I initiated a quiet meeting with my attorney. No accusations, just facts, documentation, a path forward. And third, I began monitoring the professional fallout risk. Daniel Mercer wasn't just any entrepreneur. His wife, Evelyn, held considerable sway in the same circles Claire was so desperate to climb. If Claire's actions spilled into public perception, the damage wouldn't stop at our marriage. It could touch business relationships I'd spent a decade cultivating. I wouldn't allow that. She thought she was playing chess, but she'd misjudged the board, and me. Patterns always reveal themselves, if you know how to read them. Claire thought she was being discreet, moving in shadows and whispers. But social circles, especially aspirational ones, are built on 2 things: perception and gossip. And gossip always finds its way back to someone who listens. It was during one of my routine Friday meetings with a longtime client, Mark, a veteran in the industry with deep roots, that the next piece of the puzzle landed in my lap. Over drinks, the conversation drifted toward recent social dynamics, as it often did. "You know," Mark said, swirling his whiskey, "there's been talk About Mercer, and about certain people trying to maneuver into his orbit. His gaze met mine deliberately. I held his look. You mean Claire? He gave a slow nod. Not just that. Evelyn's heard things too. Claire's been more visible lately, dropping hints about being ready for new opportunities, whatever that's supposed to mean. People notice. That phrasing again. Positioning. Mark leaned in, voice low. Word is, Mercer's wife is already moving to shut it down quietly. She doesn't play games when it comes to reputation. If Claire keeps pushing, it's going to backfire. I thanked him, finished my drink, and drove home with my mind sharper than it had been in weeks. This wasn't just about flirtation or misplaced loyalties anymore. It was about exposure, mine. If Claire's actions damaged my standing, potential deals could dry up, clients might hesitate. The perception of instability can ripple fast in tightly knit circles. And now Claire, in her arrogance, was gambling not just with her own reputation but with mine, without a second thought. Back at home, Claire was in full charm mode, prepping for yet another industry dinner. Her phone buzzed with incoming messages. Her new wardrobe, another designer piece, hung on the door. She didn't see me watching her, didn't sense that the calculation in my gaze had shifted entirely. I wasn't angry, not even sad anymore. I was done with reactive emotion. If she wanted to climb, fine. But I wouldn't let her drag me down on the way. The next morning I took action. First, I finalized the divorce filings with my attorney, making sure everything was in order before Claire could see it coming. Timing mattered. Once served, it would be clear I'd been preparing, not reacting. Second, I began quietly repositioning myself in key networks. Over the course of several discreet calls and coffee meetings, I let a select few contacts know I was stepping back from certain joint appearances for personal reasons, without giving Claire any advance warning. Third, I documented everything: spending anomalies, travel patterns, messages, dates, sightings confirmed by trusted sources. If she tried to paint this as impulsive or unfair, I'd have an airtight record. But the most critical piece came days later, when another friend in the network, one of Evelyn Mercer's confidants, passed along a pointed update. Evelyn knows, she said bluntly. Mercer's already been told to shut it down, fast. And Claire? Evelyn's making sure word spreads, quietly. If your wife keeps pushing, she'll be frozen out. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my office for a long moment, absorbing the weight of it. Claire had reached too far, too fast, and the circles she idolized were already beginning to close against her. Now all that remained was to execute the final phase, clean, controlled, undeniable. I would walk away intact. She would face the consequences of her own ambition. The morning I chose to end it was not impulsive. Every detail had been arranged weeks in advance, every move calibrated for maximum control. The paperwork had been filed that morning. My professional contacts were already briefed. The stage was set. Now it was time to execute, quietly, cleanly, and without leaving a single door open behind me. Claire came home from the gym later than usual, nearly 10. Her appearance had changed over the past 2 months: sleeker wardrobe, more polished makeup, a new watch that hadn't come from our joint account. All signals for an audience she thought she was impressing. She entered the kitchen humming to herself, thumbing through her phone. Her gym bag dropped to the floor with a casual thud. "Morning," she said lightly. "You're not at the office?" I cleared my schedule. My voice was level. That drew her attention. She looked up, one brow arch, trying for playful. "Oh? Sounds serious." "It is." I gestured to the dining table. A leather-bound folder lay there, neat and precise. No theatrics. Just facts. Claire's gaze flicked to it, then back to me. "What's this?" "Sit down. You'll want to read it." A small hesitation, a sliver of intuition flickering in her eyes. But she sat, legs crossed elegantly, still trying to maintain composure. I remained standing. Distance mattered now. "I know about the messages to Mercer," I began. "About the after-hours events. The positioning you've been doing with our mutual contacts." Her smile faltered. She opened the folder, fingers slowing as she scanned the first few pages. Screenshots of the DMs, credit card statements detailing her spending spikes, a timeline of her appearances at Mercer's events, witness confirmations from people she didn't know I was in contact with. I watched her expression pale, composure slipping one layer at a time. The color in her cheeks faded first. Then her jaw tightened. "Ethan, this isn't what you think," she began, voice softer now. It's just networking. You know how these circles work. People flirt, I cut in smoothly. This wasn't flirting. It was strategy. And now it's over. Her mouth opened again, searching for a new angle. We can talk about this. It doesn't have to go nuclear. You've always been reasonable. I shook my head once. Calm, deliberate. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to inform you. The divorce is filed. You'll be formally served later today. That landed harder. Her breath caught audibly. You're filing? Her voice rose a notch, the polished veneer starting to slip. Without even trying to fix this? I met her gaze without flinching. You made it clear what you were trying to fix, for yourself. I'm simply ensuring you do it without taking my reputation or career with you. She stood suddenly, pushing the chair back with a sharp scrape. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was nothing serious, just opportunity. There it was, the unvarnished truth, finally slipping through her defenses. I stepped closer, voice low and steady. Opportunity that would have dragged me into a public mess. You've already been flagged by Evelyn Mercer's circle. I've spent the past 3 weeks making sure none of your actions touch my business relationships. Her eyes widened at that, panic beginning to set in. You've talked to them? I've withdrawn from all joint appearances, events, and partnerships where your name might be attached to mine. Quietly, discreetly, but decisively. She stared at me, momentarily lost for words. Then came the pivot, anger. You think you can just cut me out? After everything? I didn't blink. No. You cut yourself out the moment you decided status mattered more than loyalty. A long silence followed. Claire's breath came faster, shoulders tense. I could see the wheels turning, calculations shifting from denial to damage control. I moved toward the door. You'll be contacted by my attorney. I suggest you cooperate. At the threshold, I turned once more. And Claire, choose your next moves carefully. You might still salvage some of what you wanted, or lose it all. That choice is yours. Then I left, the door closing with a quiet finality. As I stepped into the crisp morning air, a deeper weight settled over me, not relief, not victory. Just a grim awareness of what came next. I hadn't won. Not yet, but I'd taken the one thing that mattered most in this game, control. And now, the fallout would unfold. Fallout in these circles is never immediate. It comes in ripples, small shifts in tone, changes in who returns your calls, which invitations stop arriving. It's subtle at first, then, all at once, undeniable. The first sign came 3 days after Claire was served. I was in my office when an email from one of our key industry event organizers arrived. Polite, brief, but unmistakable in subtext. Given recent personal developments, we'll understand if you prefer to step back from next quarter's speaker panel. We look forward to future collaborations. It wasn't a disinvitation, it was cover. A signal that word was spreading. Not about me, but about Claire. The second sign came that weekend. A charity gala Claire had been angling to co-chair for months. Suddenly, her name was absent from the updated committee list circulated to sponsors. No announcement, no explanation. Just gone. And the third was clearest of all. Danielle Mercer stopped returning her messages. I knew this not because I was tracking her phone, no need, but because a mutual contact mentioned, with a pointed glance, Mercer's wife made it clear he's off the social grid for a while. Certain entanglements are being cleaned up. Entanglements, the polite term for a failed social gamble. Claire's carefully cultivated image began unraveling faster than even I expected. The circles she'd spent the past year trying to infiltrate were already closing ranks, and once Evelyn Mercer's influence was in play, it wasn't just about appearances. It was about survival in a world built on alliances. Friends who used to text her daily grew silent. Invitations dried up. The influencers she'd once tagged relentlessly on social media stopped engaging altogether. Claire posted fewer photos now, more forced smiles, less sparkle. I watched it unfold with a detached clarity. Not joy, not revenge. Just the quiet satisfaction of a move executed well. At home, her composure cracked further. She grew tense, snappish, oscillating between icy detachment and desperate charm when we crossed paths, an effort to reclaim some footing that no longer existed. I remained cordial, professional. No accusations, no lingering anger. I'd moved past that. My attorney handled logistics. My contacts understood my distance. The story circulating now was simple. Claire had chosen ambition over loyalty and miscalculated. The real shift came during a key client dinner I attended alone, one she had once eagerly positioned us to co-host. Mark, the same veteran client who'd first warned me, raised a glass quietly at the end of the evening. "Smart exit, Ethan. You handled it with class." There it was, acknowledgement. In this world, perception mattered, and I had preserved mine while Claire spiraled. The man she chased? Gone. The status she coveted? Evaporating. And me? I was walking forward, intact, reputation secured, networks preserved. Claire, for the first time in our marriage, was truly alone in the space she had once fought so hard to enter. And the final twist had yet to fall. By the time the dust had settled, 6 months had passed. The divorce finalized quickly. Claire, realizing how much leverage she'd already lost, didn't fight the terms hard. We negotiated a clean split. No public spectacle. Just signatures and silence. I moved into a new place, sleek, modern, simple. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was meant to be mine. I heard about Claire only in passing. Word was, she tried to reposition herself, new gym, new influencer circles, even flirted with a rebrand as a consultant in lifestyle spaces. But the stigma followed her. Evelyn Mercer's shadow still loomed. And in a world where reputation moved faster than facts, Claire's was now frozen in amber. Then came the final twist, one I hadn't expected. It began with a message from a mutual professional contact, an associate of Mercer's who was launching a new strategic venture. "Heard you've repositioned well. Would like to discuss a potential partnership, if you're open." I was. We scheduled coffee. The meeting was smooth, professional. By the end, terms were on the table. But before I left, I made one request, calm, polite, and pointed. "I have one condition," I said. "Claire is persona non grata for any future events or collaborations in this venture." There was no hesitation. "Understood." And just like that, the door Claire had spent so long trying to wedge open was sealed, for good. The final twist came weeks later, when Evelyn herself reached out. A formal invitation to join the board of her new charitable foundation, an organization Claire had once loudly coveted a role in. I accepted. Not out of spite, but out of purpose. The message it sent was clear enough without me needing to say a word. Word traveled fast. The night of the board's first public gala, I arrived alone. Colleagues greeted me warmly. Conversations were easy. Across the room, I spotted Claire, uninvited, lingering on the edges with acquaintances who now kept her at polite distance. Our eyes met briefly. No confrontation. No scene. Just a flicker of recognition in her gaze, of exactly how far the fall had gone. I didn't linger. I had my own path to walk now. The betrayal had cost me plenty. Trust, years of effort, the weight of a life I'd once believed in. But it hadn't broken me. It had clarified me. I left the gala that night not with triumph, but with something steadier, dignity, control, and a future built on truth, not appearances. Thank you for watching. Bye.